and welcome to the Piper podcast. I'm Mary Nightingale. On How I Grew My Brand, we talk to successful founders about how they made it. The good bits, the not so good, and the downright challenging. And, crucially, the key inflection points along the way to becoming a brand legend. Now, Piper's identified those as 7-17-70, whether that's millions in turnover, staff headcount or sites. 7-17-70 are the points at which a business has to pivot and adapt to thrive fully. Today I'm with Julian Hearn and James McMaster of the complete food brand Huel. Founded by Julian in 2015, this vegan human fuel sets itself at a pretty high bar. Healthy, affordable, convenient, nutritionally complete, with minimum impact on the environment and animals, and the aim of becoming a billion-pound business and household name. James joined Huel as CEO in 2017. Between them, they have reached 40 to 50% year-on-year growth. They're active in 100 countries and turned over £100 million last year, supported by a devoted and growing army of followers, or Hueligans, more of whom later. So, welcome, Julian and James. Very, very nice to meet you. So, Julian, starting with you, on the journey of 7-17-70, I mean, it looks like you've already smashed the ceiling, doesn't it?
I think we have, yeah. I think the 7 probably is one of the hardest things to get done, I think, from my perspective. Obviously, scaling thereafter is always hard, but I think the early times are the hardest times. But
fun, though, I bet.
Looking back is fun. At the time, it feels like it's overwhelming. And I've said this to somebody else the other day. I was saying, when you're in the middle of it, it feels super, super tough. But when you look back, yeah, it is the most rewarding times for sure.
So take me right back then to those tough but rewarding times. Where did the idea come from? How did you start Huel?
OK, I'll go back just before to explain this. But I sold a business back in 2011. I took a bit of time out and then got itchy feet and realised that I couldn't just sit around for the rest of my life. Had a young son and I wanted him to be a good role model. So I decided to sit down and think, right, what do I want to do? It wasn't a money-driven idea that I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that's going to be rewarding to me and be a passion project, I suppose, something that was going to be 3 days a week so I could spend time with the family at home. And so I started a business called Body Hack, which was going to be in the health and fitness space. And the idea of that business was we were going to actually put people through different meal plans, different fitness programs, and make an evidence-based website. So rather than getting told what you should do, we will show you what works and what doesn't work. So it's going to be a true reflection of what could be achieved if you followed these plans. I was a guinea pig for that, went down from 20% body fat down to 11% body fat at the age of 40. That was the leanest I'd ever been. And literally what it was, the key difference was I was doing no more exercise. The key difference, I was weighing all of my food and cooking it from scratch myself. It was 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day, so it wasn't like I was starving myself. But I can't do that. I'm a working person. I can't stop at 11 o'clock and cook an egg and some broccoli, and I can't stop at lunchtime and cook turkey and green beans and stuff. I can't do that. So at the time, my afternoon snack was a protein shake, and super convenient, super easy, easiest meal of the day to do, and made me think, why can't we put all the essential nutrients into a single product in the same format as a protein shake and get the super convenience of that, but you get all the nutrients you need. You can't live off protein. You need essential fats. You need different types of fats. You need 26 vitamins. You need fibre in your diet as well. And so I thought, I'm going to find somebody who can help me and tell me if that's possible. So I went onto Google and found James Collier, who was at the time a consultant, and he'd got 25 years experience working with the NHS as a clinical dietitian, and he'd worked with professional bodybuilders and athletes, so he really knew the academic and the practical side of things, and he put a formula together for me in about 2 weeks, and that's still pretty much the formula we've got today.
Well, I'm going to talk to you more about how it grew and how it developed, but let's go back even further.
Okay.
Tell me about your life and how it prepared you for where you are now.
Okay, so I was brought up and raised in Chesham. At the age of 5, moved to Aylesbury and just had a normal working class background. My dad worked in a shop and mum was a part-time waitress. So in terms of having any experience of startups or entrepreneurship or even business, I had zero. Left school 16, worked in a shop, then worked as a labourer for 2 years, went back to college, was going to do business studies, and I found marketing, and I just found I had a natural ability in that area. I went to uni, left there, went into the corporate world and worked for people like Waitrose, Starbucks, Tesco's, MFI. And the internet was pretty hot, so I sort of focused more and more on digital marketing. I was good at that, but still didn't really show any entrepreneurial spirit. It was literally just the age of 36 that I started, 37 I think it was, started my first business. And it was, in that case, was just a needs must. I wanted to work from home. I lived out in Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire, and there was no jobs in my area, so I decided to make my own job. So I started my own business. That's why I started it.
Well, you say you weren't necessarily a natural entrepreneur, but you had your own business when you were 8, didn't you? You were flogging something on your road when you were 8. So the spirit was there, I reckon, from the start.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes, I did. Me and my brother, we started a little stall up when we was 8 years old. We used to sell the excess plants that my mum had in her greenhouse.
There you go, you see, entrepreneur.
And I suppose I was a bit entrepreneurial because she said, "Can you sell these plants for me?" So we sold them. Once we'd sold them, we went and took the rest of them and sold those as well. We shouldn't have sold those ones.
So, fast forward a few years then, and back to the beginning of Huel. You did it on your own without a co-founder initially.
Correct.
You brought in James Collier to help you later on. But how difficult was it to do it on your own?
I don't know, because I've never done it with somebody else, right? But I can argue that I think it might be easier doing it by yourself in some ways. The only person you've got to argue with or debate with is yourself. And so there's only one direction. It's your direction. There's no disputes. There's no like, should we go left or should we go right? It's literally, we're going the way I want to go. So I think in some ways it could be easier. The worst situation I've seen sometimes is where you get 3 co-founders, you split the shares 3 ways, and you end up with, nobody's got majority share from day one. You started off with a really bad cap table effectively, and I think that can be really messy going forwards, especially when I can't see how 3 people or even 2 people can pull their weight equally. And then that can cause disputes between you, because if you're not pulling your weight and I'm pulling my weight, I'm going to resent you, and I might then go, well, I'm not going to work that hard. And so both of you might spiral downwards, but you do need to get the extra skills in. So James Collier was a skill that I didn't have. I didn't have enough knowledge to do the nutrition side. So I freelanced him and didn't have to give him shares to start with. It's only over a period of time that I saw the value in having him, and then ultimately gave him some shares in the business.
Okay. So this was 2015 you launched, you set up.
Yep.
But then 2017 you brought in James McMaster. Correct. And we will hear from James in a moment. But when did you decide, and why did you decide you needed a CEO? Because there you were going along very nicely from the sound of it, going your own way, having to answer to nobody.
Yep.
But then everything changes, right?
Yeah. Well, running a business is obviously very hard. You have to be a jack of all trades because there's obviously different parts of a business. My background is marketing, but marketing is only one department. You have HR, you have operations, you have finance, you have legals. And most of those areas, A, I don't think I'm particularly good at, and B, they don't particularly excite me. So the thing that I am good at, I wasn't doing. So spoke to Clive, who's one of our non-execs, who I brought in really early, was influential in terms of a lot of decision making. I said to him, what are we going to do? And he said, well, why don't you find somebody else to do that part of the role for you? You'd have to give up CEO. And I think for some founders, that's quite a big thing to ask. But for me, I was quite keen to give it up as quickly as possible because I wasn't enjoying it.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, we talked to a lot of founders on this series of podcasts, and people do often regard their business as their baby.
Yep.
There is this kind of almost umbilical link between people, and they're just not willing to give away the baby. But you felt able to do that. In a way, I think that's sort of unusually kind of objective.
Well, you're going to be the founder and you always will. But I think that a CEO role is quite hard. Well, it's a very hard thing to do. I don't think I could do it, and I didn't do it very well.
You did it to a certain point, but
correct.
Then
When you literally are, you're bodging your way through, right? To do it to the standard we do today, what James did, I can't do that. Therefore, it's better to. I don't think we would be where we are today if I didn't make that hard decision to do that. But at the time, I didn't think it was that big a decision. I just thought there's loads of stuff I don't like doing it. Let's get somebody who could do that.
But how did you find the right person? How did you find James?
Well, funnily enough, it took me 1 hour to find James. I got lucky, okay? I went onto LinkedIn and I selected about 20 or 30 brands that I thought were good quality, up and coming, and mostly in the food business. I didn't want to go to the really big companies. I wanted somebody with sort of smaller business experience and put a couple of terms in like CEO, manager director, and I think I might have put operations director because I thought I wanted somebody who wasn't, say, had a marketing background, because that could be too much of a conflict. And I got a shortlist pretty quick, gave it to one of the recruiters we'd working with, and they lined up some interviews. We saw some other people, but yeah, James was very impressive in interview. So it took me an hour to find him. It didn't take me that hour to offer, but it took about an hour to find him.
And the interview process, how did you actually do them?
So the interview process at Huel's today are quite long, but at the time, I'd done all the recruiting to that date, so we maybe were about, 10, 15, 20 people at the time, and I'd done all the recruiting. So I think I've got quite good tasting people, but we also believe in doing tests because obviously my experience has been sometimes people are incredibly good at interviewing, not so good at working. And sometimes one of my best employees, he was terrible interview, very, very nervous, not very good, but he's turned out to be one of the best employees. So I don't judge too much on how you present yourself in terms of interviews. So I'd like to see some work. So we typically give people a little mini case study or something to actually work on and come back and present that back to us so we can actually see their thinking rather than just their speaking.
And so you found James.
Yep.
And here he is, James McMaster. How nice to meet you.
Hello.
Hello. So from your point of view, what attracted you to Huel?
I was in a place where I'd done lots of food brands before, very challenger brands that had all gone from sort of baby to toddler and moving forward from there. And I was lucky in that my wife founded an e-com brand selling modern professional clothes. And I was really wowed by that and wanted to do something similar. But in food, there are very few brands are online. And then suddenly the stars aligned and got the phone call. I thought, wow, this is one of the few online brands and it's actually going somewhere. And the scale it had after probably like a year and a half of it being around when we first spoke was insane. And I thought I'd done fast growth before with brands like Ella's Kitchen and Goo. And in those first 2 years, Huel was much bigger.
Okay, but in terms of figures, where exactly was Huel when at that point?
So I think our second financial year...
so you launched 2015, just to take us back,
2015, yeah. And then we got to... It was about 8 million when I joined, and we had about 20 people, and now we're 200 people, and last year we were £100 million in revenue.
And that was like 50% year-on-year growth, was it last year?
So roughly now, yeah. In the early days, it was obviously a lot faster.
Wow, it's extraordinary, isn't it? What was your first impression of Julian when you met him?
Julian's very direct, so he sort of has these list of questions in his head. He sort of goes through them, and the pace is quite fast on that. And it's interesting; it kind of reflects us as a business. The pace is very fast, but he's very happy to ask the tough questions, and there's no sort of beating around the bush for it. It was probably like almost a bit too good to be true in terms of the growth level, and so kind of my radar was a bit sort of digging in and kicking the tyres a bit, and I remember asking for some numbers on financials and stuff, and there wasn't that much there. So I guess you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith. I've done personality profiling before, and when you look at someone on different spectrums, I'm very much on the risk spectrum, so I'm happy to take risks. And therefore, for me, it's sort of like, okay, the management account's sort of not much there, but I can see it, I can believe in it, I got a good feeling for the brand. And then went to a board meeting and presented my thoughts and what we'd do. And then I remember Julian asking a question about, am I obsessive as a person? I don't think I gave a very good answer. And the next time we met, I said, you know what, I wanted to come back to that. Like, I am obsessive. And it's something we've talked about a lot over the years is Huel is very addictive, and there's something about it and us as people where you just can't quite let go, and there's always more to do and there's always more you're thinking about. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why we've done well the last few years is that natural obsessive nature. And I remember the last time going back in, just for, last hour or something, the kind of unusual element was sort of Julian's son Cohen was there, and he was probably, what was he then, 5, 6, something? And he was there on his Nintendo Switch. And it's very entrepreneurial, that sort of thing. You wouldn't go to a large corporate and have a kid in the room playing on the game.
When Julian asked you if you were obsessive, why do you think he wanted to know that?
I think it was more of especially in the early years, a lot of people have good ideas, but the reality is most business fails. And you have to just be catching these plates that are falling the entire time. And I think that passion you have and that energy passes on to others. And that's something people have said about me, is I'm quite high energy, and therefore if you don't have that obsession about it, you're probably going to fail. Yeah, you need to have it.
Had you ever started your own business? Did you?
I've got something in me that likes the growth, the entrepreneurial nature, all those things. I've just never had the best idea, and actually been very lucky with Goo and Ella's Kitchen and now Huel, of 3 incredible success stories where I haven't had the idea but played a big part in how they've grown. And maybe I'm better at growing businesses rather than being the person that comes up with them.
What were the main opportunities you saw in the business when you first came to it? What potential did you see there?
Huel was already a love brand. People, the way they talk about it, and you'd see it on social, there's a attachment that people had, they wanted to share with their friends. And I think if you try and push a brand too much, then it becomes a bit fake. But what Huel had then and still has is this incredible word of mouth, where most people who buy it do so because someone told them it's really good and to go and buy it. And it's quite hard to create that and mimic that. We do things a bit differently to others, and I think people want to come and join us because of that reason. And we ask our team every 6 months, how do they feel about the business? And there's always things we've got to work on, fine, but people like working at Huel because we have a great product but a great culture as well.
What were the biggest challenges when you joined?
Well, we launched in the US just as I was joining, and then we ran out of stock after about a month. And that was pretty hard because we were gambling on how much we thought would be. And so trying to keep up with growth, trying to bring on new manufacturers, hiring people, building new websites, just juggling everything really actually at the time.
What was the most difficult thing, if there were any difficulties at all, in getting Julian to let go of?
It's probably a lot easier for us in that he, as he said, he wanted to let go of all these things. I think.
Or at least he thought he did. It might not have worked out like that.
I'm quite lucky, having worked with 2 founders previously, that I respect that there's something natural, and I kind of say it's something in his veins that you can't replicate, and therefore sometimes, even though they've got less experience on a certain thing, they might be right, and there's that feel factor, the gut feel, yeah, and that's really powerful. And businesses without founders don't have that same gut feel that gives you that kind of constant guidance. What
would your advice be to CEOs who might be thinking of taking the same direction as you and going in? And how would you advise them to approach that?
I think you've got to be quite flexible, because you've got your own belief, and I think I've got to be strong and confident in what I think and my own veins as well. But at the same time, being respectful that someone else has sort of done it for longer and they've kind of done the early yards, and how do you find that combination? And sometimes you've got to sort of have it out about, well, I think this and you think this, and how do we move that forward? And for us, it's quite good that we rarely disagree on things. So we're quite different personalities, but very, very similar in terms of view on product and view on brand and view on growth and all those things. And that's maybe a bit of luck, really. Maybe it's a bit more kind of, we're more thoughtful at the beginning on sort of not rule driven, but sort of thinking of parameters. And now there's none of that, because it sort of just happens naturally. That's because you've worked together for a long time. So how quickly can you get into that kind of that groove where you don't need to worry about things?
Julian, back to you. What would you say were the biggest challenges? You know, you fell in love with James after an hour. You thought that was going to be great, and it can't have all been smooth right from the start, despite your best intentions. So what would you say were the biggest challenges of James joining and taking up that role?
James is quite calm. I'm quite sort of opposite of calm. I'm quite passionate and I can go 0 to 100 miles an hour quite quick.
What, you mean you get angry about stuff?
I don't know if angry is quite the right word, but I get emotional. It can be useful to have those two types of personalities. I think if we were both super calm, maybe we wouldn't get everything done that needs to get done at the pace it needs to get done. If we were both heated, we'd probably end up having too many arguments. So I think the fact that we're sort of split that way works quite well. One thing we did that was useful in the early days is that we wrote out all the different departments within the business, and we agreed that this department is your responsibility, but you will consult me on big decisions. So really it ended up being basically marketing was mine, and everything else was James's. One of the beauties of being a marketing person is that really anything that affects the customer, I feel it's my right to talk about and actually be involved in. So James is very good at consulting me on big decisions, but then everything else he can crack on with. You know, you do have growing pains, and sometimes people are good for a certain period of time within a business. Yeah. But luckily James has been good from the early days when it was early, and we're now a much bigger business, which sometimes requires a different type of person. But James has been able to grow into that role, so I got lucky.
Yeah. How would you describe the culture of Huel then, overall?
It's a balance between hard work and fun, I think. We sort of codified our culture quite early. And what I tried to do is try and get a balance between my experience of two different big retailers I used to work at. One was incredibly aggressive in terms of its numbers. What the consequence of that was the targets were so high, you very rarely achieved them, and it caused a lot of conflict internally. It wasn't a very good place to work, and so I lasted there for 2 years, and I think a lot of people didn't last as long as that, so you burn people out too quick. But they did achieve great things, and it was the market leader at the time, so there was something to learn from that. I also went to a similar type of retail in the same industry, and it was such a nice place to work. Everybody loved working there. Everybody, that's why they stayed for so long. If you sneeze, 3 people will come over and say, "You okay? Do you want a tissue? Do you want to go home?" Stuff like that. It's a very, very friendly place to work, and really looked after their staff. Lots of perks, and so what I've tried to do is merge those two together and sort of meet in the middle. The problem with that company that was so nice to work for is they didn't have that drive. I think we've got that balance right. We don't push people too hard, so we burn people out. We do push them enough to achieve very good numbers, so our growth is extremely good. At the same time, we've got a great big gym. We have yoga teachers, we have PTs come in. Everybody's got share options in the business, so everybody feels like we're all in the same boat together. And it's not them and us. So James and I sit open plan. That's why we sort of speak quite a lot, because we sort of see each other all the time. So we literally walk past. The offices are very nicely designed. Our churn rate's incredibly small. In 6 years, I think there's been 3 people that have left the business that we wanted to keep.
I think one of the best things we did is we wrote down about 60 pages, a culture book. And the aim of that is if you join a company, you end up doing what the person next to you tells you, and then suddenly it becomes less tight. Whereas if you write it down, it forces you to go through it, and everyone goes through an induction and goes through page by page in this culture book.
And I still induct everybody. So everybody who comes into the business, I spend time with everybody who comes in to sort of tell them from the horse's mouth what I expect and what I don't expect.
Disagree ever on hires?
Well, interesting, actually. Less us, more about we have something like a cultural veto, where 2 people are selected to meet the candidate for about 15 minutes.
And they're completely different teams. Yeah. So they're like old school Hueligans that really know the culture really well. And they can look at a person and go, that isn't the culture fit. And they can veto that person. Even though if James and I say yes, they can veto.
Which doesn't happen that often, but it does. It has happened. And we go, fine, no problem. They're not joining. OK.
You mentioned, and I was going to bring this up, Hueligans.
Yep.
Who are these Hueligans?
So in the very early days, actually the name came from our customers. I think it's partly because we care quite a lot with the box. So I used to pack all the boxes myself. We put a free T-shirt in there. I used to put a handwritten note in each one and stuff like that. I really sort of there's a concept of 1,000 true fans. That's what I really try to focus on. Those first 1,000 customers, you really try hard, and I think if you try hard, they respond back. So we put a little bit more effort into social media, and then I think it was a wife of a customer said, "Look at these 2 Hueligans." And so now our internal staff are Hueligans and our customers are Hueligans. We're all in the same sort of community. We have a big internal customer service team that are talking a certain way. We're a little bit sassy on social media. And I think that all of that just builds a community of people. You go onto Reddit, there's a Huel thread on Reddit. And
I looked at your Twitter stuff. There's a lot of chat.
It's really engaging. So there's something sort of magical in what we've sort of created, and most of it has come from we're nice to them, they're nice back to us, and I just think it's something there. I think it's partly because we're mission based, partly because of our sort of sassiness, partly because of our aesthetic, that people just really sort of engage in the brand, and it's just been heartwarming.
Piper talk about building brand legends, and at the heart of this, it's the importance of brands to stay resolutely true to their purpose. What is Huel's purpose? Because you do have a very defined purpose, don't you?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we're nutrition complete food, but I mean the key part is minimal impact on animals and the environment. The world is in, not an ideal place in terms of global warming, and I love animals. And I remember seeing some quite horrific stuff on YouTube about how animals are treated in terms of the farming industry. So I thought trying to make people vegan is really quite hard, but there's animals being harmed, billions of animals a year. So what can we do about that? And I felt that if we can make a product which is, one of the problems with, say, vegan food, sometimes it's low in protein. So we make a high protein product. Sometimes, getting all the ingredients together is inconvenient, so we make it convenient. So if we can make convenient, affordable but complete food with minimal impact on the animals and environment, it's got to be the right thing to do. And then on top of that, there's other things like, when I started first thinking about Huel, I was thinking, okay, so, the amount of plastic waste you might have when you go to a supermarket, even the flipping cucumbers wrapped in plastic, and the cucumber's super inefficient. It's like 97% water. You ship it around, it gets bruised, you throw them away, so 30% of food is thrown away. So if we make it dried, so Huel's obviously dried food that you add the water to, you've all got water in your house, you don't need to ship water around. So then that would increase the shelf life. Because it's a powder, you can't bruise it, it can't really get damaged. So this is a very good thing, a very beneficial thing to the world. People are getting complete nutrition at a very affordable price, and animals are not being hurt, and the environment's going to be better. People join us because of that mission. Again, if you're starting a company, I would advise you to really think about why you're doing it. If you're starting, like James said earlier, if you're just starting it to make money, I would argue that's not a good place to start. You're going to struggle in lots of different ways if that's your main focus, because you won't have the sort of passion to push through the hard times.
But you were in quite a fortunate position in that you'd already made some money.
Correct.
Last time round, you're kind of serial entrepreneur in a way, aren't you? But so a lot of people don't really necessarily have that option when they start out. The money is incredibly important because it's what keeps them going.
Well, the interesting thing is that obviously Huel has made much more money than my first business, where my first business was focused around making money. The first box that I put together, I decided to go the extra mile. So I made an A4 card and I got it designed and found someone on Behance or something like that. Then I hand signed them. So that is not making money. That's actually costing me money and costing me time. I put a free T-shirt in there to make people then hopefully feel good about receiving something, and therefore they hopefully will spread the word more. That cost me money, but then that's probably been one of our best acquisition tools ever. So if you try too hard to make money, you might not make much, because people don't want to feel like they're being sold to too hard, or they don't feel like they're being conned into buying something. If you just do things for the right reason, obviously it has to give value back somehow, but if you do that, then you might end up with a much bigger business. Huel is a much, much bigger business than my first business, and it was started with the intention of never trying to make money from it.
You're listening to the Piper Podcasts, and today I'm talking to Julian Hearn and James McMaster of Huel. Where did the name Huel come from? Why Huel? How did that come about?
Okay, so names are, I think, very, very important. A unique name's good, but I think it's always nice to have a story or a meaning behind it. So I wrote down sort of meanings of what I was trying to do, and human fuel was sort of what I was trying to say. And eventually I saw Huel, and I thought, that's short, sweet, ownable, but has got a meaning behind it. The other key component, I think, of a name is the visual way it looks. And so you try it in different fonts, and the designer actually did a few different versions of different styles of logos, like handwritten script fonts and sort of blocky fonts and all different other stuff. And then when I saw Huel written pretty much as it is today, it just looked right. So for me, it was short, sweet, had a meaning, and just looked right when it was turned into a logo.
Food is imbued with so much significance. It's emotional, and it's comforting, and people overeat and people undereat and all that. Where does it sit in that? Because human fuel is all very well. It's a great idea, but food is not logical, or isn't for a lot of people. So to explain how it works.
Okay, so I separate them out into two things. I think there's entertainment food and there's functional food. So entertainment food will be your Saturday night takeaway, it'll be your Sunday roast, it will be your meal out with friends. That's all entertainment, and calories and nutrition is semi-irrelevant. It's more of the look, the art, the taste. But the primary purpose of food is clearly nutrition, right? If you don't eat the right nutrition, your body will suffer. You might even die if you don't do that, and you can have all sorts of medical problems, and lots of medical problems are caused by people not eating the right nutrition. And so you've got to have a balance between the two. So that's where Huel fits in. People say you're missing out on the joy of eating food and the social occasion. When you get up in the morning, you rush into work, there isn't much of a social occasion there. There's not much joy in grabbing something and going in the morning. Or at lunchtime when you're at work and you're busy and you've got stuff to do. Or you're a taxi driver, or you're a lorry driver. Or actually, I went into the hospital yesterday, and the doctor had a Huel shaker on their table. When people are really busy, they need to eat. They're not going to sit down and have a roast dinner in the middle of a doctor's office, right? So there's times and places for different things. And I think if you think about them as entertainment food and functional food, they both have their place and they both have their time.
So in a typical hooligan, if there's such thing, who is the typical hooligan? Who's a typical Huel user, James?
Okay, so it varies quite a lot actually. So take us as examples. Monday to Friday, breakfast, lunch and snacks, all we have in the office is Huel. And that's not forced on people in the office. It's just generally what we do and others do. And that's the inconvenient meal. You want to prioritise your health. And the evening, it's sort of a bit more relaxed. We do get people who are sort of short on time, and they're doing it for that reason. And ultimately, most people, it's healthy fast food. There are people who are photographers. There are people who work at schools and teachers and things. People trying to focus on their health goals in a particular amount of time. People who've got a plant-based diet, and as Julian said, it's quite hard to get all your nutrition from a plant-based diet, and we make it very simple for you. And we get people who are at university who see it as £1.50 per meal, and they're doing it from a cost point of view. So it's really, really broad, actually. And ultimately, when you get your head around the fact that it's your inconvenient meal, it could be one meal a week, it could be 30 meals a week. It sort of depends on your scale. It's much broader than people might think when they first look at it.
And what about the naysayers? What about detractors who say, because everyone can't be positive about it?
It's quite interesting because most people who are the naysayers, in fact, I don't know, like 99.9%, they've never tried it. And I think what people do, it's like a psychology thing in society where you try and knock something that's considered new or novel or different. And it's quite funny because the way, say, take social, the way it works is if we respond back, and we're quite witty and bit known for our kind of confident tone of voice on social, what that does is it creates a conversation, and that actually means you get, the more engagement you get in a post, the more people who see it. So these people sort of like trying to kind of shoot us down a bit from afar.
What do they say? What kind of comments do they make?
I think people are scared of something that they don't understand, and they'll say, "Oh, I like real food," and our product's made of pea and rice and oats and really healthy grains. And actually, what most people have, what they might call real food, it's just the same, but probably worse ingredients, just in a different format. Talk about a burger and bread. And bread comes from wheat that's added to water and yeast and heated up in a different way. I think what changed for us a little bit actually is about 2 years ago we launched another range, which is a hot and savoury range. And I've got friends who, they couldn't get their head past the fact that Huel is a drink and to consume that for their lunch.
So it started then as a drink.
Powder.
Powder that you then mix
to
create a drink. That kept us going for a few years in terms of the product. And then we launched a ready-to-drink version of that, and then we launched a bar. And I think the hot and savoury was a game changer because people who just couldn't get their head past that wanted something warm, wanted something they could chew, wanting something to use a spoon. And then that's what we have with our hot and savoury. It's an instant meal.
So that comes in a pouch and you add water?
You comes out, you scoop out, and it's kind of dried rice and peas and sweet corn and things, and you add water, and then it's more sort of traditional food. And I think we probably get fewer naysayers now. Now our range has got bigger.
Yeah. You talked about launching the hot and savoury range. How do you decide what you're going to move into next? Do you do customer research? Are you constantly looking and working out where you're going to go?
Our best decisions in terms of MPD has been customer-led. Our Black Edition powder, a long time they'd been asking for more protein, less carbs, and a natural sweetener.
So that's kind of more bodybuilder food, is it, broadly?
Not necessarily bodybuilder. It's just lots of people sometimes think their body doesn't respond very well to carbs. They might just feel very bloated all the time and heavy. And we launched that product, and that quickly became our best-selling product for new customers coming into the brand. Hot and savoury, again, was a customer-driven project. And again, that's been a very successful product for us. So most of our innovation comes from us looking sometimes at the market, but mostly customers.
Traditionally, brands would do a focus group with a mirror, and you'd sit there and you listen to 5 customers talk for an hour and you spend all this money. Every day, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of comments about Huel. And we piece
on social media,
on our forum, people calling us up, emailing, and we've almost got too much information. So a lot of what we do is led by this interaction. And Julian said earlier about a hooligan as someone who works at Huel, but also a customer, and it means it's this sort of lovely harmony of conversation, and we're very transparent as a brand, and people, you can look online and see the ideas people have, and we've got 50 of them we're looking at now, and the hard point is about choosing which one to do.
How much of your community are people who are doing it for weight loss and that sort of aim?
Probably not massively different to the general public. I think most people are probably on a diet at one stage or another, aren't they? So when we've ever done surveys, the two number one reasons that head and shoulders above everything else is they want 100% nutrition and they want convenience.
Let's talk a bit more about the numbers. You know, Piper believes that there are these key inflection points in a business where things need to change. At 1770. Where are you now, and where would you have been, do you think, Julian, if you hadn't taken James in the CEO role? How much difference do you think he's made?
I think that we'd probably be in a mess. I think that this was part of the problem that I was having, is that structure-wise, my instinct is a bit of a bodger. I think I can see the road ahead, and I'm quite good at focusing on what needs to be done, but then I will neglect other areas, whereas James is much better at spreading himself across all the areas and giving everything, because you are spinning a lot of plates when you're doing James's role. So I probably would have dropped a few plates, put it that way.
James?
When you talk about the different inflection points, I think in the early days it's pretty hard to avoid being what we'd call disorganised chaos. And I think chaos is a good thing. And where we are now, it's organised chaos. So we've got loads of plans and we've got great inductions and we're doing sprints every 3 months for the whole business. And it's sort of, if you become too organised and you don't want any chaos, you become the oil tanker. And we say that's the enemy, don't become the oil tanker. If you're the oil tanker, you're probably the kind of corporate efficiency bit where you become like Blockbuster or Kodak, where you go, no, this is what we do, we're great at this, and you don't spot change. Whereas I think what we're really good at is being nimble. And I think the challenge when you go through those different inflection points, 7, 17 and 70, is how do you remain nimble, but also know that everyone new who joins is expecting a greater level of organisation, and that's quite hard. And I think particularly for us, where we went through those stages in about 2 years. And how do you do that? We are now we're 100 million plus. We're at another stage, and I think I think the number of people you have is probably the biggest change I found. So now we're at 200 people. You no longer easily know the name of every person and everything about them and what they did on last Friday night and things. And I find that quite hard. And kind of how do I evolve to be the leader of the business that can handle hundreds of people more than that? And we did some research about tribes. So ancient tribes often split up around 150 to 200 people because of that same thing. But obviously in the company, you just can't do that. So what's your way around it? So we're trialing things now like we use Slack as a way of communicating. And there's something we're trying last week called Donut, which is an app. You link onto it and it picks 8 people at random and you have a conversation and you create a video call just to kind of, at least you know those 8 people better, and you just keep moving around that way. So I think that's the biggest challenge going forward, is how do you keep the people together and aligned, and that's something we've done really well. So later today we've got our all Hueligans session, which is an all hands meeting, and people really like it because it makes you tighter again, and people come and they share what's going on, and we do a ask me anything question sort of thing. So that transparency is something we need to keep going, and but be aware we've gone past that next stage, and it's all about the good bits, but knowing how not to become the oil tanker.
Who in your view, James, have been the key hires that you've made since you joined?
Ooh.
Or roles.
Head of people's been a good role in terms of culture, right? So I don't think I've ever had a head of people anywhere I've ever worked before. It's usually a head of HR, and so she does do HR, but I think it's the people element which is more important than the sort of legal HR part. Just making sure that scales with the business is really important. So I think if you go back to our early days of the team we had when we was in Aylesbury, when we scaled up to about 40 people there, that team was very, very solid and very together and in one big room. But as you scale that out, then it takes more work to make sure that you keep it.
Yeah, so the combination of the original gang plus the new gang, that can often go wrong. I think we've managed to keep almost everyone from the original gang, and that's kept the culture stronger, and also means the knowledge we've got in the business is incredible.
You are in 100 countries, aren't you?
We've sold to 100 countries.
Okay, explain where you stand internationally then.
Okay, so proactively, we're probably in, 10 countries? And then we sell to other ones if they come to us, but we don't advertise there. We don't do much, really. So really, we're in 10 countries where we're proactive. Of those, the top two are US and UK. We've got 4 satellite offices, and those offices are near enough identical. If you walk into them, you should feel like you're in the same office. So the decor, the styling, the elements in there are very, very similar. So
and where are those for?
So we have one in central London. Our main office is in Tring in Hertfordshire, where the bulk of our staff are. And then we have an office up in Birmingham, which is where our coders are. And then we've got a team in Dumbo in New York.
Okay. And in terms of the product, is it the same product that you send out worldwide, or do you tweak it for different markets?
We have to tweak it because there are legal requirements. So we run from the EU, and the EU set out, using probably thousands of doctors, thousands of nutritionists. They agree what nutrition should you have as an individual in your diet on a daily basis, and we run from that. The American one is very, very similar, but slightly different in a couple of ways. So it has to be tweaked to agree to that market. And they're pretty similar across the world, but there is a slightly different one again in Japan.
Mm. And how have you dealt with Brexit and COVID? Let's deal with Brexit first of all.
We were better than most in terms of having the pain point, mainly because we already had a trading entity. We had warehouses in different countries. So given our scale now, we've actually got 7 warehouses around the world, and we've got different manufacturing in different parts of the world. So that's helped us out a lot. COVID is probably more tricky, and that's been the impact on everything. Logistics just takes longer and is less reliable. But again, we're quite protected in that food isn't something that people could just sort of decide to have or not have. It's fairly recession-proof and resilient.
And shelf life for us has made a big difference, right? If you had to sell sandwiches, it'd be really hard because the shelf life is 7 days. But for us, if something's stuck at a port for a month, it's not the end of the world, because shipping times have changed from, say, 4 weeks to get to America. It's changed from 4 weeks to 12 weeks, up to 16 weeks at some stage. Remember the Suez crisis as well we had. In terms of COVID, the other thing is some people think that we've had a bump from COVID in terms of people wanting to eat healthier food. I think we suffered from COVID. I think that our numbers are very, very good and been very strong, but that's because we've worked harder. We were below target in the first, 2019?
Summer 20.
Yeah. And so we've had to work hard just to keep the orders where we are. So I think actually we'd be much further ahead than where we are today if COVID hadn't happened.
How do you test international markets? For example, when you went into the US, how did you go about investigating that?
Okay, so early days is different to today. The testing was very minimal. It's basically you sell it. The beauty of D2C, especially in, say, Europe, we can just ship it anywhere in the world instantly.
It's direct to consumer, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So the beauty of that is you don't have to set up you don't have to go and speak to retailers. You don't have to build your own gyms. You don't have to do anything, whatever your business is. You literally could turn some ads on with Facebook. You could do a little PR campaign, and off you go. What we did in the early days, the first country we proactively advertised in was Germany. The reason we did that is we looked at where our orders were coming from. It was our number one country outside of the UK. It's as simple as that. As we've scaled, we've become a little bit more sophisticated, and we look at lots of different factors. We look at e-commerce penetration. We look at the GDP of the country. We look at the disposable income. We look at what sort of products they're buying, and we also look at sometimes what our competitors are doing. I don't think there is a formula that works. So I think you're better off, if the costs are low, is to just try a market. Give it, try it as best as you can. Don't just half-heart it, but go in seriously. But as long as you don't have to spend too much money. But to put it in perspective, I think when we first launched in America, it was one of my most junior members of the team, did the research, sorted out a fulfillment house. We sent a few pallets over, sort of almost threw up a website and turned it on. I think the whole exercise cost us about £5,000 or £10,000
really
to test America.
And where are you in terms of turnover in America now, would you say?
It's our second biggest market, so it's grown hugely. I was just thinking, in the early days of a brand, the expectations from a customer are lower, so they're more forgiving. Now we're at a scale where if we go into a new market, people want everything to be perfect. It has made it. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It depends on how well you are known, because obviously the early adopters are willing to try a product which is inferior to what the mass market would accept. You can test markets quite cheaply using D2C for sure. And
would you go into Asia, for example? Would Japan be? Okay.
Yeah, we're in Japan now. It's quite large, 120 million people. it's quite large in terms of population, but it's not large in physical size. It's not like Australia. So it's quite, Tokyo is incredibly dense populated, not a lot of space. They've got some of the longest working hours in the world, I believe, and they've got some of the smallest accommodation. So Huel fits into their lifestyle quite well. They like very neat, tidy design aesthetic, which again fits in with us really well. So I have high hopes of Japan. And then if that works, then there's obviously lots of other Asian markets we would consider as well.
Do you work with influencers? Because you've got the Hueligans out there, but do you have official influencers?
Interestingly, we haven't really. We very, very recently just started. We never really had a proactive influencer team. Steve Bartlett is now on our board. His background was running a social media agency and working with influencers a lot. So he's amazed that we've got to where we are today without using influencers, because he said they do work. So I think it's partly his influence has made us look again at it and go, okay, this clearly does work for some brands. There's some brands who just nearly do all influencer work. So we've looked at it and we said, right, okay, we're going to go for this. So we've hired 4 people now. They're the influencer team and they're going to try and make it work over the coming months.
In terms of who are you influenced by, actually, we do really well with people having Huel in an office and telling their friends about it. And they're almost sort of daily micro influencers. And then we talked about the T-shirts. People walk around sort of subliminal messages to others to say, wow, Huel is something to be proud of and people want to be associated with something that's healthy fast food that's good for the world. So arguably that has been our version of influencers to date.
Clearly, sustainability is really important at Huel, isn't it?
Yeah, every decision we've ever made pretty much has been with that lens. Is this good or bad? So, we do sell plastic bottles, right?
We're quite data-led. So actually, when we looked at that, we did really detailed carbon footprint. And what you find out is, say, our ready-to-drink bottle, the packaging element is only 3% of the carbon footprint. And what we learned is the majority is ingredients. So most of our energy is spent on how do we change our ingredients. So when we launched a protein powder, we put in new ingredients like fava and hemp that had a lower carbon footprint than, say, rice. So I think the more we're quite open on our site, you can see all the bits of information, and that's what people like. They like understanding, because everything sustainability is actually really, really complicated.
What about funding? How has that worked throughout the life over the last, whatever it is, 6 years since Huel launched?
As you said, I did make money from previous business, so I put an initial £220,000 into Huel to start with.
Which is tiny versus most people.
Correct. I didn't spend it all.
But
no. I put that money in because actually I'd burnt some money in that previous business, Body Hack, that I mentioned earlier. I'd lost money on that one, about £80,000 I think it was. So I invested. I tried to do it as best as I can, but on the sort of cheap. I thought that the design is really important. I thought so. I paid, I think it's £10,000 for the domain name. Eventually, I paid £6,000 for the design of the visual identity,
which is something people can spend hundreds of thousands on.
Oh my God, yeah, you could spend a ton of cash on that. So it's relatively cheap, but it's not like spending £5 and getting one a fiver. It was a bit more money than some people might have spent, but I think it was a wise investment. I hate logos when they change. You want to get it right first time if you can. So I invested in what I thought was really important things, and then the initial order was, I think, £5,000. And then there was a few bits of freelance work here and there, like James Collier, for example, and stuff like that. So I didn't spend a ton of cash, but then as soon as you get going, then you need to pay for stock and you need to reorder. So we never burnt that. We never went through that money, and I never lost it, and I got that money back. And then because we were making money, the first couple of years of Huel, we was quite profitable. It was like 20% EBITDA or something crazy like that. And actually, that's quite good. So we could put the money back into the business, and then we got rolling. And I think if you can do that, if you can make profit straight away, or really aim to keep yourself very lean and mean. So we were, probably looking back, I bet, James probably goes, you probably were too lean at the time, which you probably were. But that allows you to grow bigger. The bigger you are before you take any funding, the least you're going to get diluted. So the more of the company you're going to have. So we decided to raise because...
And at what point was this?
Well, this was, 3 years in.
This is 3 years in. Actually, do you know what? It was America that drove a lot of it. So by doing America, we had a whole different supply chain, whole set of stock, and the supply chain was longer, etc. And suddenly we were coming into Christmas, and we kind of got through Christmas, didn't we? Sort of bodging, would be your word, and we kind of had stock really tight, but it wasn't very fun. We actually probably slowed down our growth because we couldn't afford to put money into stock.
We pushed out the easiest way to do it sometimes is if you speak to your suppliers and say, can I pay you a little bit longer? If you push out your payment terms and just say, look, just get me through this gap, this problem, then we'll go back to the original payment terms. You just stretch it for a little bit, and that gets you through the...
Well, like take 60 days or something.
Correct, because obviously the worst time to raise money is when you need money. That's the worst time to raise money because they've got you over a barrel, right? So don't raise money when you need it. Try and get through the hard time. Then you get to a little bit of... Because we know that Christmas times we have to order the stock for our Jan, and then we're going to grow from thereafter. So we sort of decided next summer, we'd raise next summer, get through the gap, and we'd raise next summer. So we went and started speaking, because we had loads of people knocking on our door. I started posting on LinkedIn about how our growth was going, and of course people see that, they come to you. I think people come to you is far more beneficial rather than you sending an email out to people, say, can I come and speak to you about raising money? That's probably the worst way. So people came to us, which is great. So
how many did you have coming? Can you remember?
I think we had about 30 different companies, from very small, not really legit, up to some really big ones.
Yeah.
So that summer we sort of went back through the list of the people who contacted us over the previous year, went through and sort of filtered it through, and probably met about 5 or 6, 7 maybe, and quickly whittled that down to three that were really hot. You will get added value from all of them because they've obviously got their money and they will want to help you. So we went out for dinner with all three of the different firms to try to get to know them better and outside of the office. And I think that was incredibly valuable.
And how much were we talking about at this moment?
£20 million.
Okay.
So we raised 20 million 2018, October.
And what difference has that made? What difference? Was it a game changer?
Well, there's money and then there's the value bit you say there.
Correct.
So the money bit was, rather than spending all our time on, do we have X days of stock holding or another few days, it was just painful finance stuff. We kind of got to ignore all that. And then secondly, I think what they're good at, not just them actually, but just the wider board, like Julian brought in non-execs really early in the business, which would be a massive thing that we'd recommend.
I would advise any startup, if you want to be serious, start a board really early. Get some wise brains outside of your skill set on that board to give you counsel.
We do eight board meetings a year, and the Highland team, plus the wider team, actually, not just the people in the board meeting, they've got lots of support for us. And a lot of it's about sort of, we talk about sort of, we're about to turn left, should we turn left or should we turn right? And being that sounding board, it's very easy in the business to get sort of, you can't see the wood for the trees type moment. And, they've done these things before and it's very helpful to us.
How big were you when you raised 20 million?
We were about
40
million run rate, I think.
And you said with that initial 200 grand, you didn't spend it. Did you spend the 20 million? Or did you stash it away for a rainy day?
It depends on how you define spend. It's invested in stock. So has it gone to zero? No, don't think so. So if we sold all our stock through, we get that money back. So we haven't burnt it. It's in stock or in the business somehow.
It's a very interesting, good news story, isn't it? You seem to be in an amazing place. Julian, you said when you set out, it wasn't about making money, but you have made money. How does it feel? What does money mean to you?
I mean, and just to be clear, I haven't got that money. It's paper money at the moment. So we probably could have sold up. We've had people come to us. We probably could have sold up numerous times and walked away with a very big chunk of cash. But then what are you going to do then, right? You still got to do something. I don't know. I think that, of course, I live a slightly different lifestyle than I had in the past, but I still live half a mile from where I was brought up. I still got the same group of friends. I still go to the same sort of pubs and restaurants pretty much. So my lifestyle hasn't changed massively. And the numbers that are going to be coming down the pipe at some point will be immense compared to what I was brought up with. But I don't know. I'm not quite there yet, so I don't know. Maybe I'll come back in a couple of years and tell you.
How would you describe your role now?
I'm CMO, so I'm still heavily involved. I go in 4 days a week, 4.5 days a week. I'm still working with days off, so let's call it 5 days a week, really. I love it, yeah.
And you're still texting James even when you're on holiday?
Correct.
Well, look, it's lovely to meet you both. James and Julian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.